Toys by Valerie Torres. The sun had crept in early, waking Junior up from his restless sleep. The cold morning air seeped through his window, yet it did not stop him from starting his day off with a warm, cheerful smile. Today was it, he thought. Today was going to be his last day in this house. After months of living in this nightmare-filled house, they were finally moving far away. The thought left him with a powerful sense of hope. Hope that this 6-month nightmare was over. Hope that he would finally live a normal life away from this house. Hope that finally they would leave him in peace. Without hesitation, Junior jumped out of his bed and ran straight for his sister's room. Since the beginning, his sister Dal had been the most supportive. There were nights where Junior found it damn near impossible to sleep in his own bed because they would constantly bother him. His room was located on the second floor, with a laundry chute that led to the basement. Ever since the first night he spent in that room, he had closed off the small hole in the floor with just about anything he could find. When his parents asked why he wasn't using the laundry chute, he simply said there were voices coming from inside it. There were nights where the voices seemed to be getting angrier, so he would run to his sister's room. Luckily, she didn't have a laundry chute, so it made sleeping there a little bit easier. But that didn't last for too long. His parents usually made a fuss whenever they found out he slept in her room. His desperation did get the better of him, and on many mornings, Dal had found him inside her closet holding onto a bat for dear life. Dal didn't believe him at first. Voices coming from the laundry chute? She didn't even believe there was a god, let alone spirits living in the same house as they. But that wasn't it, Junior said to her one evening. Dal could remember the conversation like it happened minutes ago, though it had only been months. It's the toys. It's all of them. The house was left abandoned for many years until it was eventually sold to their family at a low price. When asked about why he had bought it, Junior's dad said, "It was dirt cheap. I would have been stupid to pass the house." The house was in modest condition, with just a little bit of fixing here and there. There were 2 floors, 3 bathrooms, 4 rooms, a big backyard, and a basement. The basement was well below ground level, with the lights barely working. Junior's dad had hired electricians to take a look at it, but it was of no avail. It was an empty room for the most part, save for a small closet in the far corner underneath the stairs. It would have gone unnoticed due to the lack of light. Junior's mom made the discovery first, as she was setting up the washing machine and laundry. It was a plain, simple wooden door with a heavy-duty lock. There were even chains around the door and bolted to the floor for extra measure. Curiosity got the better of Junior's parents, and they eventually opened the door that same morning. Inside was a tiny room with a giant red toy box inside. It was also wrapped in chains as well, but that did not detour their curiosity. Inside was a bunch of toys, ranging from clowns dressed in red and white to action figures that dated back decades ago. And without giving much thought to their original dwelling, they decided to give the toys to their 10-year-old son, Junior. It started off the moment he was left alone in the room with them. They had this unsettling aura around them, which made him feel uncomfortable almost immediately. Not to mention that disturbing odor that came from them. No matter where they were placed in his room, their eyes always followed him. It didn't take long afterwards for Junior to hear the voices coming from the toys. It was a few days later, as he was in a deep sleep, when he felt a slight pain on the bottom of his foot. He heard something that sounded like a deep moaning sound, as if someone who was starving was about to eat a hearty meal. The pain mixed with the troubled sound alerted Junior. He got up immediately and saw the red and white clown at the foot of his bed. His right hand held onto a knife with a bit of blood on it. His eyes were pure black, and his grin seemed to get wider the longer Junior sat and stared at it. "How's it hanging, Junior?" it asked. Its voice with a mixture of calm and sweet, with a hint of twisted darkness. It proceeded to bring the knife closer to its mouth and licked off the blood. "My, you taste pretty good," it said, laughing maniacally. Junior screamed for help at that moment, alerting everyone in the house of his horror. Within seconds, the door flew open, revealing his concerned parents and older sister. The lights were turned on, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. His toys were back in place inside the closet where the door left open. His eyes inspected the room as Junior proceeded to explain what he had saw. "Honey, we're just having a nightmare," his mom said, trying to comfort her distressed son. "You have to believe me," he yelled, begging for someone to accept his words. Dal noticed his bloodied foot first, yelping at the sight of the pool of blood at the end of the bed. On the floor underneath his bed was a kitchen knife. The disturbing image left all three of them shocked, yet puzzled with a nail-biting question. How did it get there? That night, Junior got 7 stitches on the bottom of his foot. In the next few weeks, he would end up with more stitches all over his body. His parents did not know what to do. His doctors felt as though he was being abused and sent social workers for weeks to investigate. They found nothing. It was then believed that he was self-harming, though no matter what they did to hide the knives, they would always end up in his room. Yet no one believed his story about the toys. Dal figured there was something up, but couldn't place her finger on it. She wouldn't believe in his story until she saw for herself one night. Junior made it a habit of throwing the toys down the laundry chute, hoping that he would not find them in his room. He would barricade himself inside his room, locking everything down. And every night he would find himself huddled in a corner, shaking uncontrollably at the sound of a knife scratching the door. Every morning his parents would be alarmed to find a handful of knives outside his damaged bedroom door. One night, Dal came home late and attempted to sneak back into her room quietly. About halfway up the stairs, she heard a scratching noise coming from Junior's room. The hallway was pitch black, and the only form of light came from her cell phone. She switched her phone's flashlight on, and to her horror, she saw an Elmo doll looking back at her, holding one of the kitchen knives. Its black, soulless eyes looked through her, as if it was just realizing that it was caught. Not caring in the slightest, it turned around and proceeded to continue its mission of trying to get past the door. Dal could hear Junior crying on the other side, "Please leave me alone." His pleas were going unanswered. Dal stood there in shock and horror as this thing continued hacking at the door. After what felt like hours, Dal finally found her voice and began screaming. By the time her parents got to her, the doll had vanished, leaving behind the kitchen knife it was using. Dal tried to explain what she had seen, but her parents didn't listen. Since then, Dal kept a close eye on her brother. She found herself locking both of them inside her room, refusing to open the door even for their mother. She even went as far as to keep the knives with her at all times. She wasn't directly their target, but she refused to let her brother suffer alone. Somehow the toys noticed that. So there will be times when Dal would be taking a shower and would catch a glimpse of something red in the corner of the bathroom. When she would try to take a look, it would vanish. It would never go near her, but it always loomed around her. It was as if it wanted to remind her that they could do something if they wanted to. After a bit of investigating, Dal and Junior were able to find out a small piece of information about the previous homeowners. The previous family had 2 kids, both boys. One mysteriously went missing a couple months after the family had moved in. There were few details about what had happened prior to the disappearance, but a lot of blood was eventually found in the small room in the basement. The property had been abandoned since then. When Dal showed her parents what she had found, they finally decided to move, and today was that day. Junior stopped at his sister's door. His determination wavered a bit. He intended to wake his sister up, but he had second thoughts. Maybe I should let her sleep in, he thought. He only imagined that amount of sleep she lost over the past few months. After all she did for him, the least he could do was let her sleep in. With that, he turned around and ran downstairs towards the kitchen. His parents had woken up early, since they wanted to get a head start. Junior was more than eager to help them out. As he passed the basement, he noticed the door was left open. The door was always closed and locked unless his mom was doing laundry or if his dad was working on something. but it remained open for God knows how long. Junior could feel his energy drain. Though he was excited to leave, he knew that they would try to do something to him. He would try to enjoy this feeling, but he knew deep down that something was going to happen. "Junior, you're up so early. Why don't you fix yourself a bowl of cereal, and then help out with the move?" his mom said, as she began to lay out boxes on the kitchen counter. As Junior sat himself on a chair, he caught a glimpse of the same red clown outside the kitchen window. He was on top of a tree in the backyard, no higher than 6 or 7 feet. His eyes were more human-like. The blood-red color of his eyes grew brighter with each second that passed. He had a bloody knife on one hand, and as he waved with the other, Junior sat there in complete horror. It felt as though he couldn't breathe. The only thing his mind was telling him was to run as far away from this place as possible. Before Junior had a chance to scream and alert his parents, the clown brought his free hand to his mouth, demanding that he kept quiet. The clown moved his hand behind him, as if to grab something. He brought out a picture of him and his sister. Dal kept that same small photo by her bed. It was a gift Junior had given her last year for her birthday. He couldn't get her a picture frame, so he had decorated construction paper around it. Dal was happy nonetheless. Junior felt his body freeze at that very moment. Dal wasn't with them, though she knew that they were moving today. In the height of the excitement and the thought of giving her a few more minutes of sleep, he neglected to check in on her. He didn't know if whether or not she was still sleeping, or if one of them had gotten her. The clown proceeded to bring the knife towards the picture and stab out the part where her sister sat next to him. The clown's eyes grew wide with excitement. He could smell Junior's fear. It reeked of both assault and copper. It left the toys in a high state. It was total bliss. As if reading Junior's mind, the clown nodded. It then pointed its finger downward. Junior didn't need the clown to explain what it meant. He knew he was referring to the basement. Junior just didn't know what to do. Was he going to leave his sister, the only person who ever believed him, to be killed and eaten by them? Was he going to live with himself knowing he was too much of a coward? He loved his sister, but he also feared for his life. What was he going to do? If he told his parents, they weren't going to believe him. Seconds turned to minutes. Minutes turned to what felt like hours. Junior had to make a move. The clown continued to look at him, waiting for him to make up his mind. After a few minutes, Junior stood up from his seat. I'm not that hungry. I decided I'm going to start packing in the basement. His parents stopped what they were doing and looked at Junior with a confused face. "But I thought you were scared of the basement or something," his dad asked. "I am. But I've decided to face my fear today. Today is the last day," Junior said, keeping his eyes on the clown outside. The clown dropped the picture and proceeded to stare back at Junior. His eyes began to grow darker, and his grin became crooked. Its irises began to grow smaller until it was no bigger than a dot. To Junior's horror, it looked scarier than before. The closer Junior got to the basement door, the more gruesome the clown became. Its eyes were now completely white, and its smile was disfigured and disformed. It was as if its smile could no longer fit its face, so its plastic skin and lips were bulging out of place. Junior's parents exchanged looks, but did not question their son. They watched as he walked up to the open basement door and stood there silently. To them, Junior looked like he didn't know what he wanted to do. A part of Junior did not know exactly what to do. Part of him wanted to run back and forget everything. A part of him wanted to pray that his sister would forgive him. Without thinking, Junior switched the lights on. For the first time in months, the lights began to flicker on. His sister's clothes were thrown around the stairs. They were torn to shreds. There were also a large amount of blood along the walls, with red fur sticking to it. The lights then flickered off, finally revealing a light coming from the hidden room underneath the stairs. Without any more hesitation, Junior closed the door behind him and began to descend into the basement.